Oh, clay. Clay comes from nature. It's made out of mud, but it's very pliable and stays together, so it's a special kind of mud. When you first get clay out of a store-bought package, it is already very condensed and perfect for working. But what I'm doing here is taking an older piece of clay that's already been used and I'm wedging it. You can either roll and push with your hand, or since this is small, the best technique is usually to do short little hard throws onto the table. Wedging takes a long time and it's very important because you need that clay to be condensed and have no air bubbles. I'll explain why later. Now I'm forming clay. I'm kind of bopping this irregular shape into place by rotating it and striking it with the heel of my other hand to get it into more of a sphere shape for what we're going to make. What we're going to make first is called a pinch pot. I'm pushing in my thumb, not all the way, but down towards the bottom. Then, like a potter on a potter's wheel, I'll rotate this with one hand and apply even slow pressure with the other hand. My thumb is on the inside and my fingers on the outside supporting the wall of that clay. Anytime you're forming clay, you want it to be very gradual and slow so that that clay doesn't get too weak. You're going to feel with your hands, making sure that this pinch pot is even, about pencil thickness all the way around. You're trying to make like a dome shape. A pinch pot works for a lot of structures because it's strong. It was formed out of a solid piece, has no air bubbles, and will support itself while you're baking or making other things. A big part of your time spent using clay is making sure it's even and making sure it's smooth. You can use a tiny drip of water to help smooth your clay, but most smoothing happens with even pressure from your fingers. So not getting your clay slimy, but instead really looking for tiny cracks that you can barely see while it's wet like this, but you'll really see once it's come out of the kiln, and you're smoothing it, especially around the lip of your bowl. That's the upper tip. Once everything's smooth and even and looks as perfect as you can get it, you're going to figure out how you want your animal, monster, fish to sit. In this example, I'm setting it up on its side, making sure it's very smooth, and then using two small spheres that I rolled under the palm of my hand on the table to make some eyes. That's demonstrating how I rolled them to be smooth, condensed, and very round. So there's something called score. Score is when you take a rough or needle-like instrument, and you'll see in a bit here, I'm etching lines into the place where it will connect. So I'm etching lines into both areas where the connection will take place. Connecting your clay is super important. When people don't take time to score and then slip their clay, that means put some liquidy clay glue in between. When they don't take that time, then those pieces fall right off. You'll notice I just use a toothbrush too. Toothbrush works because it'll kind of score if you push hard enough and add that slip, that gooey, slimy clay liquid in between your two pieces. Did you see how I support under with my thumb as I press it on? This is all so soft that if you just press from one side, the whole thing would collapse. And then the third and equally important part of connection is connecting with a tool and really smearing and making those two pieces blend together. You can still get a separated look, but you need to smooth them down and make sure you've really pressed and connected. So these eyes are going to be really secure with my score, slip, and connect. There's something in clay called a slab. That's just a flat, even piece of clay. And with a needle tool, you can cut out flat forms, or more like shapes, and use them for your project. So out of that slab, I cut a tongue. I'm sort of scoring and slipping with my toothbrush technique. And then I'm going to press that inside of my mouth. You don't have to add a tongue, but I just wanted to show you how to do it if you want. After pressing a little bit more, I now do that connecting, that sort of melding together, where I'm in the back of the throat pushing that clay to be more completely connected, or else that tongue would fall right out of the mouth. I'm using the tool that also helps do a very hard, permanent job of connection. In clay, there's also something called a coil. That's when you start with a ball of clay, but then roll it back and forth. Roll it back and forth until it's a very even snake shape. You can snip off pieces of coil to use for your project. Using the needle tool, there I just pulled off a piece to see how it would work as a support tail. And again, here's my toothbrush, which is that score and slip shortcut. You have to do it hard to get into that clay, make sure it's really been scratched, both parts, and then press it together and really connect and smooth it out together, or else the tail falls off. So the last step, after you've smoothed your project, everything is connected really well, and you've added all the forms you want to the larger form, you can add texture. I have a variety of tools that you can experiment with, and you can do different areas of different texture. But the smoother you get your object before you add the texture, the better your texture looks. Instead of accidental, it looks very purposeful. So I decided I needed a couple more finishing touches, and I used bits of my coil, rolled it on one side of itself to make a little cone shape and make a tooth. I'll use the same score and slip technique. Since this one was small, I didn't want to use the toothbrush to connect it into the mouth. I did a lot of connecting then off camera that you didn't see. And here's my other tooth. You can see how I rolled it, score, and slip. So the big test as to whether you're paying attention will be, do all of your parts of your monster stay on, or do they fall right off? Sometimes during the drying process, it'll fall off. Sometimes during the firing process, it'll fall off. And sometimes after it's already been fired in the kiln, it'll fall off. So then we wait. We wait until your creature is bone dry. This is really changed color because a lot of the moisture has come out. And once it's bone dry, completely dry as the air will make it, we'll put it into the kiln. One of these kinds of kilns is in the basement of Grout Elementary. And unfortunately, students can't help come down and put things in, but we build out shelves while we're putting your pieces in. And then this thing goes to about 1,000 or 2,000 degrees in order to fire your clay. We use the term fire instead of cook or bake, but it's very similar to baking. Like you'd want your bread or your meat to be even for cooking. That's why we're making your clay even. And these techniques are age old. This is a much older version of a kiln, but they have ways of making these become very hot enough to create the pottery that you see here. All of the things we're doing have been happening for generations and generations. And then once something comes out of the kiln, and once it's been fired a single time, that's called bisqueware. And that's when we will have some fun with paint or glaze and add some color and some other details to our animals. All right, have fun.